You ever overhear something you weren't supposed to? Something that stops you cold? Like catching a glimpse behind the curtain, only to realize the person pulling the strings isn't who you thought they were. That's what happened to a 23-year-old waitress named Rachel who worked the late shift at one of those upscale rooftop lounges in downtown Chicago. She wasn't supposed to be there that night. She wasn't supposed to be near that private booth. And she definitely wasn't supposed to press record on her phone. But she did. And the world listened. The video? It blew up. We're talking tens of millions of views in just a few hours. Twitter threads. Reddit armors. Articles with headlines like, "Is this who's really running the country?" You've probably seen the memes. But what's behind the viral explosion is a lot darker than a few spicy quotes and shaky iPhone footage. Because the man at the center of it, let's just call him Mr. L, wasn't just anyone. He was one of the most powerful CEOs in the US. A man whose face you might not recognize but whose company's logo is probably sitting somewhere in your house right now. Rachel didn't know any of that when she walked over to refill the water glasses. But by the time the night was over, she wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a whistleblower. Or a traitor. Depending on who you ask. So let's rewind. Let's piece it together, minute by minute. Because this isn't just a story about one man's unfiltered thoughts over bourbon and steak tartare. It's about power, class, privacy, and what happens when someone without a name takes on someone whose name opens every door. We'll get to the footage, don't worry. But first, you need to understand Rachel. Because she didn't go looking for this moment. The moment found her. Rachel had been working at Altitude, a rooftop restaurant perched on the 53rd floor of the Goldspire building, for almost 6 months. It wasn't glamorous. But the tips were decent, and on a good night, a single table could drop a 4-digit bill if the wine flowed freely. She was saving for school. Not a sob story, just life. Rent in the city, 2 roommates, and a dream of becoming a documentary filmmaker. She liked stories. Real ones. The kind that peeled back the surface. Which is probably why, when she heard the laughter coming from the booth in the corner, low, sharp, smug, she didn't walk away. That night, a private event was happening. Closed doors. No walk-ins. The kind of thing you needed a lanyard and a background check for. It wasn't on the books. None of the staff were told who was coming. Just that the VIP section had to be cleared and no phones allowed in the service area. Rachel kept her phone anyway. Not because she planned to record anything. But because her sister was pregnant and due any day, and Rachel didn't want to miss the call. She kept it tucked in her apron, on silent. No harm. Until she overheard that voice. At first, it was just noise. A group of men talking over each other, laughing too loud, the clink of whiskey glasses echoing against marble. But then came the voice. Deep. Polished. Aggressively confident. Rachel couldn't quite place it. But it was familiar. Like hearing a commercial in another room. You don't know the product, but the tone is unmistakable, authority. She turned slightly, just as the man leaned forward and said, "I don't hire people. I buy leverage." That line hit her in the chest. She paused mid-step, tray in hand. Because who even says that? But it didn't stop there. The man continued, calmly, without hesitation. He talked about layoffs like they were line items. About dodging regulations. About manipulating quarterly numbers to manage perception. And that's when Rachel did something she'd never done before. She slid her phone out of her apron and tapped record. She thought maybe she'd catch something. Proof of arrogance. Maybe even a viral TikTok moment. She didn't expect to capture a confession. Over the next 14 minutes, the man known only as Mr. L laid out a blueprint. A blueprint for exploitation. For deception. For unchecked power in a boardroom culture where egos eat ethics for breakfast. He named names. Talked about shell companies and offshore holdings. Joked about bribing regulators and paying fines as cost of business. At one point, he even laughed about an entire department being shut down because empathy doesn't scale. Rachel's hand shook. She nearly dropped the phone. But she kept recording. And when the check was signed and the men left, leaving behind a half-empty bottle of $900 scotch, Rachel slipped into the staff bathroom, locked the door, and listened to the playback. Her jaw dropped. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she uploaded a 90-second clip to a burner Twitter account with the caption, "This is what they really think of us." Within 3 hours, it had 12 million views. And that's when everything changed. First came the comments. Then the journalists. Then the legal threats. But before we dive into the explosion, before we talk about lawsuits, network takedowns, and private investigators, you need to hear what was actually said. Because it's not just the tone. Or the language. It's the casual cruelty. Here's the first part of the transcript, word for word. "I don't manage people. I manage pressure. People crack. Data doesn't. You want loyalty? Get a dog." Laughter. "I keep HR around so no one sues when we burn out the interns. It's like emotional Febreze, just keeps the place smelling fresh." More laughter. "You think any of them will leave? They've got rent. They've got debt. They're stuck. That's the genius of it. You give just enough that quitting feels like jumping without a parachute." Now pause. Think about that. This wasn't an angry rant. It wasn't a meltdown. It was calm. Polished. Delivered like a TED Talk with a splash of whiskey. And when people online heard it, the reaction wasn't just shock. It was recognition. Because for every Mr. L, there are hundreds of others who don't get caught. Rachel didn't post his face. She didn't post his name. But she didn't have to. People figured it out within hours. The voice. The references. The location. Internet sleuths connected the dots faster than the lawyers could start deleting tweets. And when they did, everything started to fall apart. But not for the man at the center. At least not at first. It was Rachel whose life exploded. She was doxxed. Harassed. Called a liar. Then a hero. Then a liar again. She lost her job. Had to move out. Slept on a friend's couch for 2 weeks. But she didn't take the video down. Because she knew what she heard. She knew what she recorded. And once the full audio leaked, uncut, unedited, undeniable, there was no turning back. In the next part, we're going to break down the fallout. Who Mr. L really is. How his empire was built. And why this recording didn't just embarrass a CEO, it cracked open a system built on silence. The kind of silence Rachel shattered with just one swipe of her finger. The internet moves fast. Too fast. Within 24 hours of Rachel uploading the clip, it had already been downloaded, stitched, subtitled, and dissected by thousands of content creators. It was on Instagram Reels, TikTok slideshows, and YouTube think pieces. Twitter, now called X, ironically, turned the video into a social battlefield. On one side were the ones calling her a hero, a whistleblower, someone brave enough to pull back the velvet curtain on how the elite really talk when they think no one's listening. On the other side, people who said she broke the law. That she invaded someone's privacy. That she was just another clout-chasing server trying to ruin a man's life. But the truth? The truth was that Rachel didn't expect the video to go viral. She thought maybe a few friends would see it. Maybe it would get buried under memes and disappear by the weekend. She didn't expect to wake up to 87 missed calls, 4 news trucks outside her building, and a handwritten note slipped under her door that simply read, "You should delete that video." No name. No number. Just that sentence. She called her manager at altitude and said she wouldn't be coming in. There was a long pause. Then, the voice on the other end said, "That's probably for the best." By noon, her login to the employee portal was deactivated. By dinner, she was officially no longer with the company. The internet may have called her a hero, but real life? Real life was ice cold. Now let's talk about Mr. L. Nobody knew who he was at first. The video didn't show his face. Rachel was careful, intentionally filming low, mostly audio. But there were breadcrumbs. A reference to an executive board meeting in Dallas the previous Friday. A joke about the subscription numbers finally topping 200 million. And the voice, smooth, clipped, almost smug, was the kind of voice you'd hear on earnings calls or CNBC interviews. By midnight, Reddit had cracked it. They compared the audio to publicly available interviews, matched the location to restaurant receipts uploaded by a now-suspended Yelp reviewer, and found the exact reservation made under a fake corporate name, Dalton Reserves LLC. And that's when the internet settled on one name. Lance Wetherell, CEO of Veer. If you've never heard of Veer, you've definitely used it. It's one of the biggest tech advertising platforms in the world. It powers everything from personalized streaming ads to the data systems behind hundreds of apps. They call it invisible infrastructure. Which is ironic, because Lance Wetherell built his career by being loud, charismatic, cocky, the kind of guy who wore sneakers on stage and quoted Nietzsche in interviews. The kind of guy who smiled wide for press photos and signed every company-wide email with "Onward." But behind closed doors? Rachel's recording painted a very different picture. Here's another part of the transcript. You don't scale by being good. You scale by being first. And then you buy everyone who's better. If ethics were profitable, we'd all have a chief conscience officer. Laughter. They complain about burnout, but I've got a treadmill of Ivy Leaguers lined up with debt and ambition. You give 'em titles. You give 'em ping-pong tables. Then you work 'em till they forget who they are. That section hit hard. Especially among younger workers in tech, who had lived through rounds of layoffs, endless crunch cycles, and bosses who promised work-life balance in all-hands meetings while sending Slack messages at 11 p.m. People weren't shocked. They were seen. It felt like Rachel had captured something bigger than just one night at a restaurant. She captured a culture. A system. And now that the mask had slipped, the question was, what would happen next? Well, first came denial. Veer issued a short statement that read, "We are aware of an unauthorized recording circulating online. The company does not comment on private conversations, especially those that may have been edited or taken out of context. We remain committed to transparency, innovation, and integrity." Which, in PR speak, basically means, please stop talking about this. But the internet wasn't done. Over the next 48 hours, people started digging. Old emails. Past interviews. Former employees who suddenly felt a lot braver. A Medium post titled "What It Was Really Like to Work at Veer" shot to the top of Hacker News. It described a culture of overwork, intimidation, and quiet retaliation against anyone who dared raise concerns. The author claimed they'd been hospitalized for exhaustion during a product launch and were told, "Rest is a privilege, not a right." Sound familiar? It should. Because that same line showed up in Rachel's recording. And suddenly, this wasn't just about a video. It was about patterns, systems, and the man behind it all. So who is Lance Wetherell? Let's rewind the tape. Lance grew up in Palo Alto, the son of a venture capitalist and a neuroscientist. He got his first taste of fame when he sold a mobile app to a major telecom at 19. By 24, he was on Forbes 30 Under 30. At 27, he launched Veer, a company that promised to revolutionize the way data connects people and products. It worked. Veer exploded. Investors loved him. He gave keynotes in turtlenecks and opened every pitch with a joke. He talked about mind share, cultural velocity, and momentum as currency. People didn't always know what he meant, but they nodded anyway. Because Lance made money. Lots of it. By 2024, he was worth $1.8 billion. But behind the charm was a man who didn't believe in limits. Former colleagues described him as brilliant but brutal. One ex-exec said, "Lance didn't build a company. He built a cult. And we all drank the Kool-Aid because we were afraid to get left behind." That fear? It's what Rachel caught on tape. Not rage. Not cruelty. Control. The kind of cold, calculated confidence that comes from knowing no one ever says no to you. At least, not until someone records you saying the quiet part out loud. As the video spread, so did the fallout. A coalition of advocacy groups called for an investigation into Veer's labor practices. 2 senators tweeted the clip with the caption, "We need better protections for workers." And Rachel? She was still living in the eye of the storm. She did an anonymous interview with a podcast, using a voice modulator. She said, "I didn't post it to go viral. I posted it because I couldn't pretend I didn't hear it. And I wanted people to know, this is how they talk about us when they think we're invisible. And for a while, that's what she remained. Invisible. She didn't do any TV interviews. She turned down book deals. She just watched. Watched as the video took on a life of its own. Watched as people started holding up their phones in meetings, pretending to record, just to make managers nervous. Watched as college students made parody skits of Mr. L on TikTok. But not everyone was laughing. Because somewhere behind all the memes, a man was preparing a response. Lance Wetherell didn't tweet. He didn't post. He didn't go live on Instagram or launch a podcast to set the record straight. He flew to the Cayman Islands. Public records showed a private jet registered to Veer Global touching down in Grand Cayman less than 36 hours after the full video leaked. And that silence? It said more than 1,000 PR statements ever could. Because if you're innocent, you face the storm. If you're guilty, you run. But this story isn't about Lance anymore. Not really. It's about the people who felt seen. The workers who quietly started recording their own meetings. The interns who started whispering emotional Febreze to each other when HR walked into the room. The startup employees who pushed for contracts, protections, and clear boundaries. It was like Rachel's video tore a hole in the sky, and now everyone could see what was always there, hidden in plain sight. A system that rewards silence. That punishes truth. And that desperately hopes no one is listening. But someone was. And in the next part, we'll look at the lawsuits. Because when money's at stake, the powerful don't just fight back, they fight dirty. You won't believe what lengths were taken to bury this recording, erase Rachel's digital footprint, and shift the blame. So don't go anywhere. This story? It's just heating up. You ever hear that saying, when you go after the king, you'd better not miss? Rachel didn't miss. But the king wasn't going down without a fight. By the end of the week, the internet had moved on. Kind of. Another celebrity breakup. Another major product launch. But behind closed doors, Veer's legal machine was just getting started. What you need to understand is this: Lance Wetherell didn't just run a company. He ran a fortress. Veer's legal team didn't operate like normal lawyers. They were ex-federal prosecutors, cybersecurity experts, and private fixers with ties in every major city. Their job wasn't just to win. Their job was to erase threats. Quietly, Rachel had become a threat. And so, they came for her. It started with a DM. From a burner account. No profile picture. Just a message: lawyers will be in touch. You've made a serious mistake. That was followed by an email to the anonymous Twitter handle she had used. The subject line read, defamation. Copyright violation. Pending legal action. Inside? A PDF letter, 6 pages long, accusing her of breaking privacy laws, violating company secrets, and causing irreparable harm to a public individual's reputation. But here's the kicker: nowhere in the letter did they ever say the audio was fake. They never denied it was Lance. Because they couldn't. It was real. So instead, they tried to change the story. Shift the blame. Make Rachel the problem. They accused her of criminal wiretapping, a legal gray area depending on the state. They said she recorded a private conversation without consent. They claimed damages in the tens of millions, loss of revenue, stock value fluctuations, brand deterioration. The goal wasn't justice. It was fear. It was meant to scare her into silence. But Rachel? She didn't flinch. Instead of hiding, she went to the press. She gave her first face-on interview to an independent online outlet called The Briefing Desk. No big studios. No filters. Just her, in a hoodie, sitting on a friend's futon, explaining everything. She looked tired. Hollow-eyed. But calm. And when the interviewer asked, "What do you say to people who think you shouldn't have recorded him?" she didn't blink. I say the truth isn't always convenient. But it's still the truth. The internet erupted again. #StandWithRachel started trending. GoFundMe pages were launched. Within 72 hours, she had legal counsel. Not corporate. Not flashy. But sharp. A team of pro bono attorneys who specialized in whistleblower protections and media law. They pushed back. And here's where it gets interesting. Because when Rachel's lawyers responded to Veer's cease and desist, they included a single line at the top of the reply. Discovery works both ways. That one sentence changed everything. Because it meant, if Veer wanted to sue Rachel, they'd have to open their books. Submit evidence. Allow Rachel's legal team access to emails, memos, and, most terrifying of all, internal meeting recordings. And Veer? They really didn't want that. Because Rachel wasn't the only one who'd been listening. Other employees started coming forward. One anonymous staff member, let's call him Danny, shared a recording from a company all-hands meeting where Lance allegedly said, "If you're not clocking 60 hours a week, you're dead weight. Hustle is the currency. If you're here for balance, go work for a non-profit." Another former engineer posted screenshots from internal Slack messages. Managers joking about sleep deprivation. Emojis used to rate overtime performance. A whole subculture built around pushing people past their limits. And with every leak, Lance's defense got weaker. Suddenly, it wasn't just one video. It was a pattern. A culture. An empire built on grind, silence, and fear. But instead of apologizing, instead of stepping down or addressing any of it publicly, Lance doubled down. Veer's PR team launched a full-scale counterattack. They started funding reputation management influencers. People who would go on TikTok and YouTube saying things like, "She broke the law. It's that simple. Do you really think billionaires talk like that in public?" Seems like someone wanted to get famous. Some of them were subtle. Others were straight-up hit jobs. Rachel's old social media was dug up. Old tweets from when she was a teenager, jokes taken out of context. Photos from parties. A video of her singing badly at karaoke. All of it was weaponized. Because when you can't win the argument, you destroy the person. But Rachel didn't crack. Instead, she leaned into it. She started her own account. Verified. Simple bio, the waitress with the phone. And she began telling her side. Not with drama. Not with rage. With facts. With receipts. With calm, measured responses. She talked about being followed to the train station. About getting fake delivery orders to her friend's apartment at 2 a.m. About how her landlord received an anonymous complaint that she was running an unlicensed business. It was all designed to push her into silence. But all it did was make her louder. And people noticed. So did the press. Major networks started running segments. Not just about the recording, but about the lengths Veer was going to erase it. And then came the lawsuit. But not from Veer. From Rachel. Her lawyers filed a civil suit alleging retaliation, harassment, and violation of whistleblower protections. The suit named Veer. It named Lance. And it named 3 unknown agents they believed were hired to intimidate her. It was bold. And it worked. Because once it hit court, everything had to be entered into public record. Emails. Invoices. Security logs. It painted a picture of a company in panic mode. Executives scheduling crisis meetings labeled Operation Silence. Money funneled into reputation firms. Private investigators hired through third-party shells. The most chilling part? An internal message, never meant to see daylight, that simply said, "She's not the problem. The precedent is." That message became the headline of the next viral wave. Because they weren't just trying to crush Rachel. They were trying to send a message to every worker watching. A warning, don't get ideas. But the opposite happened. More and more people started sharing their stories. A Starbucks barista in Seattle recorded a regional manager calling her replaceable caffeine furniture. A junior architect leaked a memo where firm partners advised making the interns cry a little, it builds resilience. People were done. Rachel had cracked the dam, and now the water was rushing out. The world didn't suddenly become just. The system didn't collapse. But for once, someone pushed back, and didn't get buried for it. And Lance? Well, we'll get to him in a second. But first, something strange happened. An anonymous package arrived at Rachel's lawyer's office. No return address. No postmark. Inside? A USB drive. Labeled only, "Listen." It contained audio. Clear. Crisp. A boardroom meeting, Veer's executive retreat in Colorado, held a month before the recording that made Rachel famous. And on that recording? Lance again. Talking strategy. Talking layoffs. Talking manipulation. Here's a quote. "They don't want freedom. They want safety. So you give them safety. Then you take the freedom. And they thank you for it." That audio had never been heard before. Until now. And with it, Rachel's case grew even stronger. Because this wasn't just a rogue moment in a restaurant. This was a pattern. A doctrine. And in the next part, we're going to look at what happened when the board finally turned on their golden boy. Because empires don't fall in one blow. They crumble, piece by piece. And for Lance Wetherill? The cracks were starting to show. Power protects itself. Until it can't. For 2 weeks, the board at Veer stayed quiet. No comments. No appearances. No leaked memos or rumored shakeups. Publicly, the company held the line, no comment on ongoing litigation. Internally, it was panic mode. They weren't just dealing with bad press anymore. They were dealing with exposure. Real, damning, undeniable exposure. The audio recordings Rachel had released, and the anonymous USB that landed in her lawyer's hands, weren't just embarrassing. They were dangerous. They made the board look complicit. And that was something they couldn't ignore. See, when a CEO gets caught, there's usually a strategy: deny, discredit, distract, delay. But when the entire C-suite starts sweating, the playbook changes. It becomes about containment. Sacrifice. Who to protect, and who to throw under the bus. And Lance Wetherill? He was expensive dead weight. The final straw came during a Sunday board meeting at a private estate in Napa. No cameras. No press. Just 12 very nervous, very powerful people sitting around a long oak table asking the same question over and over. Is this survivable? The answer was no. Because Rachel's story wasn't just a flash-in-the-pan scandal anymore. It was a movement. Her video had been viewed over 108 million times. Dozens of former employees were coming forward with stories. Shareholders were demanding answers. And, perhaps worst of all, Veer's stock had dropped 23%. In the world of big tech, that's not just a dip. That's blood in the water. So the board drafted a statement. It was polished, clinical, and surgically vague. Effective immediately, Lance Wetherill will be stepping down from his role as CEO of Veer. We thank him for his vision and leadership and wish him well in his future endeavors. You've seen this kind of line before. It's what they say when they want you to forget. But the internet doesn't forget. And neither did Rachel. She watched the news break from a borrowed laptop in a shared apartment on the north side of Chicago. No champagne. No cheering. Just a long exhale and the tiniest nod of relief. One head had rolled. But it wasn't over. Because even without Lance, the machine was still running. Veer appointed an interim CEO, a former CFO named Meredith Hill, known for her no-nonsense style and love of aggressive pivoting. Her first act? A corporate video, released on all platforms, where she promised a full internal review and a new era of transparency. The internet? Wasn't buying it. The top comment under the video said, "Translation, we found a new liar with better PR training." But here's the part no one expected. Meredith didn't try to bury Rachel. She tried to talk to her. Seriously. 3 days after taking over, Meredith's office reached out to Rachel's lawyer requesting a sit-down. No press. No cameras. Just a conversation. Rachel said no. Twice. But on the third offer, delivered with a handwritten note that read, "Sometimes it's better to talk than tweet," Rachel agreed. The meeting took place in a neutral office space rented for the occasion. 2 lawyers, 2 assistants, 1 security guard. And Rachel. No cameras. Just Rachel, sitting across from the woman now running the company she had helped expose. The conversation lasted over 2 hours. What was said behind those doors? We only know fragments. But here's what Rachel shared in a post later that night. She listened. I didn't expect that. She didn't excuse what happened. She didn't ask me to back off. She just asked, how do we fix it? It wasn't an apology. But it was a start. Meredith Hill launched an internal audit 2 days later. She brought in an outside firm, one with no ties to Veer, no ex-employees, and no incentive to play nice. Their job? Interview staff. Review documents. Listen to every scrap of audio leaked since the original video. Build a timeline. Find the truth. And what they found was worse than anyone expected. Turns out, Lance wasn't just talk. He had personally approved budget cuts that led to the mass outsourcing of Veer's customer service, cuts that increased user complaints by 400% while boosting profit margins by 17%. He had overseen illegal contract revisions for junior developers that stripped them of overtime pay by relabeling them as creative consultants. And he had signed off on a resilience metrics program, internally dubbed the Burn Tracker, designed to monitor employee responsiveness after hours and rank them on an unofficial pressure index. The higher your score, the more likely you were to be promoted. The more times you failed to respond at night, you got flagged. All of this was real. All of it backed by internal files, emails, and Slack transcripts. And as each revelation came to light, Rachel's story stopped being just a video. It became a case study. Colleges started discussing it in ethics classes. Labor lawyers started citing it in lawsuits. Tech startups began rewriting their employee handbooks overnight, terrified of being the next headline. But Rachel? She stayed quiet. She posted once a week, maybe less. No brand deals. No podcast. Just updates. Like, thanks to everyone asking, I'm okay. Still working on the lawsuit. Still fighting. And people respected that. Because it wasn't about fame for her. It was about truth. But that doesn't mean things got easier. In fact, they got harder. Her name was now in every search engine. People sent her DMs asking her to expose their bosses. Others accused her of bringing down a company just because she didn't like her tip. Her college dreams were on pause. She was still couch surfing. Still trying to feel normal. But through it all, she held her ground. Because she knew one thing. If she backed down now, the next person might never speak up. And then, in the middle of all this, something unexpected happened. Rachel got a job offer. From a media company. Not as a waitress. Not even in food service. As a story consultant. They wanted her to help produce a documentary series on corporate accountability. Her role? Find the stories people were afraid to tell. Help them get told safely. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't big money. But it was real. And Rachel took it. Because after all of this, she still believed in stories. And then, in an ironic twist of fate, something happened that made her story come full circle. Another recording. But this time, it wasn't Rachel behind the phone. It was a janitor. At a major conference in San Francisco. They'd been cleaning a hallway when they heard two executives from another tech firm joking about Rochelling their interns. As in, scaring them into silence. The janitor hit record. Posted the clip anonymously. It went viral. And the phrase "don't get Rochelled" suddenly flipped meaning. Now, it wasn't about punishing whistleblowers. It was about being afraid of becoming one. The phrase took on new power. New weight. Because it meant, finally, they were watching. Listening. Learning. And the people who once talked freely, cruelly, carelessly? Now they were checking for phones. Now they were watching what they said. Now they were sweating. All because one waitress didn't look away. Didn't stay quiet. Didn't pretend it wasn't her problem. She recorded. She uploaded. She stood firm. And in the next part, we're going to see what that kind of courage really costs. Because it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The lawsuits were heating up. The countersuits were coming. The countersuits were coming. And a mysterious email was about to hit Rachel's inbox, one that would blow the entire case wide open. So stay tuned. Because the waitress with the phone? She wasn't done yet. It came at 3:14 in the morning. An email with no subject line. No sender name. Just an address that looked like it had been generated by smashing a keyboard. Letters, numbers, symbols, all jumbled. Like someone didn't want to be traced. Rachel almost deleted it. But something about it stopped her thumb. Inside was a single sentence. You were right to record it. You're not the only one. Attached was a zip file. Encrypted. She didn't open it. She wasn't stupid. She sent it to her lawyers first. They brought in a digital security expert to check it for malware or tracking. What they found instead? Evidence. Hard, undeniable, direct evidence of systemic abuse. Recordings. Internal memos. Screenshots of Slack threads. Audio files from inside Veer headquarters, not just from Lance's time, but from months prior. Stuff that had been quietly saved by employees afraid to come forward. Until now. There were memos from HR discussing quiet cuts, which is corporate speak for pushing people out without firing them, reducing hours, shifting roles, gaslighting them into quitting so the company didn't have to pay severance. There was an audio clip from a manager joking. Make them cry in 90 days or less, that's the onboarding challenge. There was even a PowerPoint presentation from a leadership retreat titled, Retention Through Pressure, Leveraging Instability to Cement Loyalty. Let that title sink in. This wasn't accidental cruelty. It was engineered. Strategized. Built into the company's DNA like it was a product feature. The ZIP file came from someone calling themselves Echo. No other clues. No other contact. Just that name. But the material? It was a game changer. Because now Rachel's case wasn't just about what she heard. It was about what everyone else had known and hidden. Her lawyers filed a motion to enter the evidence into the civil case against Veer. And just like that, the courtroom stakes shot through the roof. Veer's lawyers scrambled. They asked the judge to seal the documents. The judge refused. The evidence went public. And when it did, people couldn't look away. News anchors were quoting the slides. Influencers read memos aloud on live streams. Hashtags like #BurnTracker and #EchoLeaks started trending. One file stood out more than the rest. A document titled, Tiered Human Assets, Segmenting Staff for Scalable Utility. It broke down employees into categories. Level 1, burners. Low cost, high output. Disposable. Level 2, cores. Reliable, promotable. Keep in rotation. Level 3, legacy loads. High pay, low flexibility. Target for cutbacks. It was the kind of thing you might see in a dystopian novel. But it was real. Signed by Lance himself. Dated 6 months before the rooftop dinner Rachel had worked. People were horrified. But they weren't surprised. Because for a lot of workers, this wasn't news. It was confirmation. Proof of what they'd already felt in their gut, that they weren't being managed. They were being used. And suddenly, Rachel wasn't just a waitress with a phone anymore. She was a symbol. But symbols don't get much sleep. The more the story grew, the more Rachel felt the weight. She started receiving letters, physical letters, from other whistleblowers. Some signed. Most anonymous. Stories of unpaid overtime, toxic bosses, silent HR departments, and careers ruined for speaking up. She read every single one. And then she did something bold. She posted an open call on her feed. If you've got a story, and you're afraid to tell it, I'm listening. No judgment. No names. Just truth. The messages poured in. Hundreds. Then thousands. Rachel and her small legal team couldn't keep up. So she did what she always wanted to do. She started building something. A platform. Not a personal blog or podcast. A proper resource hub. With guides on workers' rights. Information on whistleblower protections. A secure contact form for submitting stories. Everything she wished she'd had when it all began. She called it, Off the Record. And within a week, it was featured on national news. By this point, Veer was burning. The stock was free-falling. Sponsors were pulling out. College grads were declining offers en masse. Shareholder meetings were tense. Heated. Someone even live-streamed a portion of one, where an investor shouted, "You knew this was happening. You all knew. And you let him keep running the show." It was chaos. And at the center of it all, somehow still standing, was Rachel. But there was one person we hadn't heard from. One person whose silence had become deafening. Lance Wetherell. Since the day he stepped down, he hadn't been seen. No statements. No interviews. No public appearances. Until now. Because just as Rachel's platform launched, a grainy video surfaced online. A man, walking barefoot across a private beach in the Bahamas, wearing a wrinkled linen shirt and staring at the ocean. It was Lance. He looked thinner. Older. Sunburned. Someone had recorded him from a distance. The caption? Even God's fall. The video went viral in minutes. Suddenly, people wanted more. Was he sorry? Was he hiding? Was he planning a comeback? 2 days later, we got our answer. A 22-minute interview posted exclusively on a startup news platform known for tech industry apologetics. It was polished. Lit like a TED Talk. Just Lance, sitting in a chair, talking directly to the camera. No apology. No acceptance of blame. Just this. I was trying to build something great. Did I push too hard? Maybe. But you don't build skyscrapers without pressure. You don't win by being soft. This has all been blown out of proportion by people who don't understand what it takes to lead. He called Rachel's recording a violation of basic trust. He said she had weaponized a moment. He said Veer was better off without the noise. He ended with, "I'm not going anywhere." That line? It backfired. The internet turned on him instantly. Meme after meme. Clips of his old quotes layered over the leaked slides. Side-by-side images of him unstage versus in court. Not going anywhere trended, but as a joke. Because if there's one thing people hate more than cruelty, it's unrepentant arrogance. Lance's video didn't repair his image. It nailed the coffin shut. Meanwhile, Rachel kept building. She gave her first keynote at a labor conference. She spoke calmly. Simply. She said, "I'm not a hero. I just didn't look away. And I hope that's something we all start doing, paying attention, speaking up, protecting each other when the system won't." And you know what? People listened. More platforms started offering whistleblower protections. Companies began implementing ethics audits, not because they wanted to, but because their employees demanded it. Change was slow. Messy. Imperfect. But it was happening. And all because one night, a Waitress hit record. All because she trusted what she heard. Believed what she saw. Stood her ground, even when it felt like the entire world was trying to silence her. And in the final part of this story, we'll talk about what came next. The final court ruling. The settlement. The unexpected twist that made even Rachel question everything she thought she knew. And the one phone call that changed it all. Because when the dust settles, that's when the truth really comes out. The courtroom was silent. Not dramatic movie scene silent. Not gasp and gavel silent. Just heavy. Like everyone was waiting to breathe. Rachel sat near the back, next to her lawyer, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the judge's bench. She wasn't nervous anymore. Just ready. Tired, but ready. It had been 15 months since the night on the rooftop. 15 months of threats, lawsuits, sleepless nights, interviews, headlines, backlash, praise, confusion, and clarity. 15 months since she pressed record. Now, the final ruling. The judge's voice was steady. Clear. The court finds sufficient evidence of systemic abuse, retaliation, and corporate negligence. The plaintiff is awarded full whistleblower protections under federal and state law. Furthermore, the defendant is ordered to pay damages, attorney's fees, and issue a formal public statement acknowledging misconduct. Rachel didn't cry. She just exhaled. Her lawyer gave her a small nod, and that was it. No confetti. No crowd. Just a simple win. A heavy, hard-earned, life-changing win. Veer issued the court-mandated statement the next day. It was a cold, legally scrubbed, publicly posted announcement. We acknowledge that during the period between 2021 to 2023, our company's internal practices did not meet the standards expected by our employees, shareholders, or the public. We apologize to those affected and are committed to improving our systems moving forward. No mention of Rachel. No mention of Lance. But everyone knew what it was about. Lance Wetherell, meanwhile, disappeared from the public eye again. Rumors swirled that he was in Dubai, that he'd changed his name, that he was quietly investing in a new AI firm through proxies. Nobody could confirm anything. His image was toast. His legacy? Burned. But billionaires don't go broke. They just go quiet. And Rachel? She kept moving forward. She didn't spend her settlement money on anything flashy. Paid off her debts. Helped her sister buy a reliable car. Donated a chunk to fund legal aid for workers facing retaliation. She still lived in a modest apartment. Still carried the same beat-up backpack. Still answered every message on off the record personally. That's who she was. Not a savior. Not a martyr. Just someone who didn't look away. But then, something happened. Something nobody expected. A phone call. It came one afternoon, while Rachel was eating lunch at a park bench. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Almost. She answered. Is this Rachel? The voice was low. Careful. Yes. Who's this? They're starting again. Different company. Different name. Same blueprint. I used to work with him. I have proof. Silence. Rachel felt the breath catch in her throat. Can you send it to me? Not over the phone. Not over email. But I'll find you. Just, be ready. The line went dead. Rachel stared at the screen, heart thudding. Because deep down, she already knew. Lance wasn't done. He'd vanished, but not retired. He'd just rebranded. And he wasn't alone. There were others like him. Too many. They change logos. Change names. Start new ventures. Raise new capital. Pitch new promises. But they carry the same mindset. The same toxicity. The same scripts. And if nobody records them? They just keep going. Rachel sat still for a long time. Then she opened her backpack, pulled out a notebook, and wrote down a name. Project Echo 2. She didn't know what would come next. Not exactly. But she knew she'd be watching. And this time? She wasn't alone. Off the Record had grown into a full-fledged nonprofit. Dozens of volunteers. A legal advisory board. Partnerships with investigative journalists. Anonymous story hubs. Workshops on digital safety for employees. A network of protection and truth, built by someone who'd once carried cocktails and dropped napkins. It wasn't a tech company. It wasn't sleek or flashy. But it mattered. It mattered because it scared the right people. It mattered because it listened to the invisible. It mattered because for every Lance, there was a Rachel. And now they had each other. And you, watching this video, sitting wherever you are, you might be wondering. What now? What can you do? Well, you pay attention. You trust your gut. You speak up when something feels wrong. And if you're afraid? If you don't know who to tell? There are people out there who will believe you. Who will help you stay safe. And maybe one day, it'll be your story that changes everything. Just like hers did. So yeah. That's what happened when a waitress pressed record. Not for fame. Not for revenge. Just for the truth. And in the end? The truth was enough. It always is.